and try and find out the truth. It all boils down to an understanding of the Bible. And I want to ask one question. What single word is the most important word in this book that will unlock the whole book? Now, there are two words that are candidates for the key word. One is the word kingdom, but that word, though it does run right through the Bible, changes its meaning as it goes through. In the Old Testament, it's the kingdom of Israel, and in the New Testament, it's the kingdom of God, or the kingdom of heaven. But I want to present you with another word which I believe is the key to sorting out all these issues that I've mentioned and to understanding the story of the whole Bible, and it is the word covenant. I believe that's the key word that unlocks the whole Bible. And we ask two questions today. Number one, how many covenants are there in the Bible? And the second question, and how many of them affect me as a Christian? Those are the two key questions. And it's because there are different answers to those questions that we have all the variety of church life. When we ask how many covenants there are, some people say there's only one in the whole Bible, and they call it the covenant of grace, though that particular phrase can't be found anywhere in the Bible. Then there are those who say there are two covenants in the Bible, the Old and the New. Then there are those who say there are three. Then there are those who say there are five. And then there are those who say there are seven. Isn't it confusing? And when you get more than one in the Bible, how many of those affect Christians? How many of those bind us to God? Well, now that's my subject for today. And the first thing I want to talk about is, what is a covenant? It is a binding agreement between two parties or two persons. A very solemn agreement carrying mutual obligations between the two, based on promises, based on commitment. But we don't have many examples of covenants in daily life. And therefore it's not a word we tend to use in ordinary society. The word that we do use for a binding agreement is the word contract. And life is full of contracts, business contracts particularly. But I want to show you that there's a huge difference between a covenant and a contract. And the one thing you can never do is have a contract with God. But you'd be amazed how many people try. And try and get into an agreement with God. I'll do this if you'll do that. That's a contract. A covenant is very different. So let's look at contracts, because we're more familiar with those. Supposing I want to get a house built for me. I look around for a builder, a contractor, we call them in England. I don't know if you do here. It means someone will take a building contract out. And you work out the terms of the contract between you because you are on equal terms. And that's the key to a contract. You each have something that the other person needs. And therefore you're in a position to bargain. The builder has skill and labor and materials, and you have money. And he wants your money, and you want his skill and materials and labor. So you negotiate a contract, and you're both in a position to drive a hard bargain. And finally, you decide on a contract with the builder that he will build the house for a certain price and in a certain time. And then, when you've agreed on that and you agree on the price and the time, you sign the contract, and you might even seal it, but you certainly sign it. It is a serious and binding contract. However, there is something about a contract, and it's this. If one party fails to keep their promise, the other party is released from the contract. If one side lets you down, the other side is free. That's a contract. You may renegotiate it, but the contract is binding, and one side breaks it and the other side is free. Now, there are all kinds of contracts. I've cited a simple building contract, but business is built on it every day and all day, all over the world. And then another kind of contract is a peace treaty, or a ceasefire, or an armistice when there has been a war. And that again is negotiated by two parties, both of whom are in a position to negotiate. And you make a contract for peace. Now, all that's a contract. But what about a covenant? What's different? Well, if I can put it this way, a contract is bilateral. Two equal parties are in a position to negotiate the terms. Each has something that the other wants. Whereas in a covenant, it is unilateral. It is one-sided. It is agreed by one party. And one party settles the terms because they're in a stronger position. And a covenant is always between someone who is stronger and someone who is weaker. And the stronger party decides all the terms of the covenant. The only thing the other party can do is either say yes or no, either accept the covenant or reject it. They can't change it. And furthermore, in a covenant, if one party lets the covenant down, that does not release the other party from the promises that are made, provided the covenant has been unconditional. A covenant can be conditional, but normally they're unconditional. And once they're accepted, they're binding. But even if they're broken by the weaker party, the stronger is still bound to keep the promises made if it's an unconditional covenant. So when we come across a covenant in the Bible, first question you ask is it conditional or unconditional? If it's conditional, it's more like a contract. But if it's unconditional, it binds the party who makes it whatever happens on the other side. That's quite a big difference from a contract. Now, just to make sure that you've understood what I've said so far, I'm going to ask you a question and ask you to vote with your hands. And the question is, do you think marriage is a contract or a covenant? I'll give you just a little minute to think about it, and then we're going to vote. Let's see what we think. Is marriage a contract? Put your hand up. Don't be afraid. Not many. Covenant. Overwhelming. But you see, this is a Christian congregation. And you know the truth. Now, hands up those who don't like putting hands up in meetings. Quite a lot of you. All right. I didn't want to embarrass you at all. Well, the truth is that God intended marriage to be a covenant, but in our society it is rapidly becoming a contract. An agreement between two equal parties who negotiate